Getting tired of lockdowns and masks? Why don't you go to Mars? Thanks to Elon Musk's reusable rocket technology, this could be a real possibility in a few years. However, it is a slightly pricey possibility. You see, going to Mars now costs about $10 billion. However, Musk is promising that his company, SpaceX, will be able to achieve the bargain price of only $200,000 for a ticket to Mars. Now, Musk usually discusses technological and financial obstacles to the first city on Mars. However, what I am interested in would be the kind of psychological and political obstacles. So I'm going to draw on the thoughts of Plato from over 2,000 years ago, most notably his laws, or nomoi. In the laws, Plato discusses the founding of a fictional city called Magnesia that is to be built on an isolated Cretan island. And many of the difficulties facing the settlers on Magnesia can be juxtaposed to the potential life on Mars. So in order to go to Mars or to send materials to Mars, Musk needs to wait for the planets to align. Both Mars and the Earth move in egg-shaped orbits around the Sun, and it is only every 2 years that they come very close together, and hence it is only every 2 years that a mission to Mars is the most achievable. I don't know how far Musk's plans have been thrown off by the current crisis, but he did plan to bring some first infrastructure up to Mars by 2022, and then to put first men on Mars by 2024. He would build first cities in 2025 and expects to have a fully functioning city by 2050, which will first be a village and then a town and then a city, and later on even multiple cities. By inventing reusable rockets, Musk was able to lower the price of space exploration considerably. However, even if he manages to lower the price of a ticket to Mars to $200,000, it's clear that it's only billionaires who will be able to go there. And this has raised a lot of criticism against Musk because he claims to develop this apocalyptic technology in order to save humanity from possible Armageddon, such as them getting hit by a meteor or massive extinction due to global warming and so on. But if it's only billionaires that are able to go, it's not a very convincing altruistic project. However, just for the sake of a thought experiment, what would happen if we did send hundreds of rich dudes to Mars? What kind of challenges would they face? Well, first there is cosmic radiation. They wouldn't be protected by the Earth's atmosphere, and they would be much more prone to cancer than people living on Earth. And then there's the cold. The mean surface temperatures of Mars are between minus 87 Celsius and minus 5 Celsius. Not very cozy, right? Then there's scarce water supplies. Actually, it's quite a sensation that there is water on Mars in the first place. However, if you look at it soberly, it's more scarce than the Earth's driest desert. And then there's the air. Martian atmosphere is 95% carbon dioxide. So these are just some of the challenges that we would have when living on Mars. And it's clear that we would need complex life-supporting equipment just to survive. But there are other, more subtle, psychological and political challenges to starting cities from scratch in an isolated location. Plato's dialogue, The Laws from 360 BC, tell us about these challenges. So as I mentioned, Plato's Laws is about a colony, a fictional city that is to be founded on an isolated Cretan island. And the whole book is dedicated to this question: what makes a well-functioning city? Which is an especially pertinent question if you are building one from scratch. So I will raise 5 points inspired by Plato's laws, and we'll discuss special psychological and political challenges posed by this project. The first will be the expenses, the second, scarcity, third, legislation, fourth, corruptibility, and fifth, the distribution of power. One of Plato's points is, and that's my point number 1, is that it's a costly project that will likely face opposition, and it will need a firm hand and a driven individual to really stick it through. and Plato says, "Give me a city under a tyrant." Ho tyrannos in Greek means someone who doesn't inherit power or come into power by democratic means. Rather, it's somebody who simply grasps it and uses it in an absolute manner. So Plato says that in order to kickstart such a huge project as the founding of a city in an isolated location, you need someone like that. You need someone who is dedicated, who is strong-willed, and who will do everything that it takes. And we do have someone like that. Musk is young, he's courageous, he's a visionary. He fits the bill of Plato's tyrant. So my second point is scarcity. We must consider that when founding new cities, the settlers who come to live there must be prepared to live under pretty extreme conditions. There's only so much they can bring with them, and while not living in a fully developed city, they will not have access to all the luxuries they're used to. Plato says that these people need to be people who tolerate a whole lifetime of fixed and modest limits to property. And in our case, where we're having hundreds of billionaires come to Mars, this is an even more extreme challenge because they are not used to living a life of asceticism. They can't just go off and build a big-ass house somewhere in the wilderness. They have to stay together and to rely on each other just to survive. My third point was legislation. Plato points out that the settlers will all come from very different cultures. So then the problem arises, how will they live together? By what law will they abide? And this too points back to number one, namely the need for a firm hand. So Plato says that it is the tyrant who will found the city, who will also have to come up with the legislation for the city. Because somebody has to decide on the rules that everybody will abide by. And this will be true for the settlers on Mars, even more so. We'll have billionaires from Asia, from Europe, from the US, from Australia, maybe even from Africa, we don't know, who will want to come up there. They'll have very different cultural backgrounds, very different understandings of how to live together. And somebody will have to decide what their legislation will be. What laws will they abide by? And Musk already thought about this. When he was asked what kind of legislation will there be on Mars, he tweeted, "Direct democracy by the people. Laws must be short, as there is trickery in length. Automatic expiration of rules to prevent death by bureaucracy. Any rule can be removed by 40% of people to overcome inertia. Freedom." And indeed, new colonial cities often inspired utopian fantasies of a new society, of a fresh start, a clean slate. And that is how colonial cities in the New World 500 years ago were conceived of as well, as harmonious places where perfect social conditions will reign. So 500 years ago, the Spanish crown funded Christopher Columbus' exploration of America, and they also funded the creation of new cities. And now these new cities were to be better cities than European cities. They were to implement the Enlightenment ideals of perfect geometry and order, and to create social order as well as aesthetic order. So for instance, in 1513, the city of Santo Domingo was founded on the Caribbean island of Hispaniola. The city's perfect geometrical order was supposed to encourage also social order among both the settlers and the natives. And in North America, the city of Philadelphia was founded by William Penn. Philadelphia means brotherly love, so it was supposed to be a city of love and harmony. And it was built in the form of a grid representing equality for all the people who lived there, both the settlers and the natives, according to Penn. However, you all know what happened to the indigenous populations of the Americas. So this only goes to show that good intentions do not necessarily lead to good outcomes. And the same is likely to happen with this project of direct democracy on Mars. And why do I think that? Well, that leads me to point 4, corruptibility. Plato thought that absolute power leads to absolute corruptibility. So while it was necessary to have a tyrant in place to kickstart a new city, with time, this tyrant, even if he was noble in the beginning, is likely to turn unjust. Plato says, "There does not exist, my friends, a mortal soul whose nature, when young and irresponsible, will ever be able to stand being in the highest ruling position upon earth." We might say here, upon Mars, without getting surfeited in mind with that greatest of disorders, folly, and earning the detestation of its nearest friends. So Elon Musk, the founder of SpaceX, will be in the highest ruling position of Mars, and his power will be unprecedented by anything on Earth. Not only will he be the founder of the city, but the settlers' very air they breathe will be dependent on his supplies and on his company's ability to create the kind of protection and the life support systems they need to just survive there. So while he may implement direct democracy in the beginning, it is very likely that he too will become corrupt and the system will collapse into a kind of absolute tyranny. And this brings me to my fifth point, the distribution of power. So even though Plato does say that there needs to be a tyrant in the beginning to kickstart the founding of a city, he is more subtle than, for instance, modernist planners like Le Corbusier. Le Corbusier too thought that democracy was a bit pesky, and he wanted the power of total planning. However, by contrast to Le Corbusier, Plato was more aware of this potential for corruptibility in human beings and for the need for the power to be balanced. So while in his earlier works, like The Republic, he pleaded for the absolute power of philosophers, in this later work, maybe he grew milder with old age, but he envisioned the power of ruling a city to be distributed to several individuals. So he wanted the power of the tyrant to be counterweighed by what he calls the Nocturnal Council, a council of elders meeting to revise and supplement the laws, and especially to think about virtue such as justice and to study it. So founding a new city from scratch in an isolated and hard-to-reach location, it takes a special set of skills. However, running the city justly is another set of skills. And according to Plato, these tasks shouldn't be conferred to a single person. They have to be distributed. Because if all the influence and all the power were just held by one person, one company, there cannot be any distribution, any real distribution of power. And in this kind of scenario where you have one company that has the monopoly on all vital resources on Mars, it is hard to imagine how such a distribution of power would be possible at all.